Huey's here.
Yes, ma'am.
Gary. Johnita.
Yes.
Me. Jim Thompson. No, Jim Thompson.
Yeah, he's
Yes,
there.
Rachel's here. I'm sorry, who's here?
Jim Thompson is here.
He is here.
Oh,
Okay.
here.
I couldn't hear you, Jim. My apologies. Has Jim Kellen signed on?
No.
No. No Jolene. No Irma.
No.
Rachel.
Nope.
Well, I hate doing it this way because it is a low number, but it is a quorum. But it's only 5 of us, but that's a quorum for us. What time do you all have? I have 4:08. Let's get going because we have a guest and that's not fair. So let's go ahead, Suzanne, if you want to call us to order with a prayer, please.
Yes. As soon as Ed sits down and closes the door, we'll begin.
Okay.
The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
With you.
Gracious God, we give you thanks for this day and thank you for all that you are doing here. And even in the messiness and the chaos of it all, God, we have to believe that you are here and that your purposes are being laid out before us. God, we pray that our hearts would be softened and we would be able to listen to one another in love. We ask, oh God, for your wisdom as Stephanie speaks to us today, as well as we do the business that needs to be done. God, we ask all of this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
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 So before we begin delving into the business of grace, I've invited Stephanie Towns, who is on the Bishop's Diocesan staff, and her primary role is in youth ministry, young adults. And so since we've been speaking so much about youth ministry and what it means for grace to think about that at this point, I asked a professional to come in and give us some advice. So Stephanie, would you take over and share with us what you know about youth ministry and how that might impact grace?
Sure, I'd love to. And you make me sound so official, a professional. Well, I've met many of you in passing and different things, but I'm delighted to talk to you about thinking about hiring a youth minister. As Suzanne was kind of filling me in a bit, I mentioned that, it's a really exciting thing to think like you have a critical mass enough of youth to be thinking about needing someone to minister directly to them, because not all of our congregations do. I talked to plenty of congregations who don't have any young people at all in their parish, and it's an exciting problem to have. So I just want to start by naming that. And I have a PowerPoint that I'll share my screen so we can just to keep me on track of some thoughts I wanted to share with you. Let's see here. Where is? Oh, right. Everybody can see that? Okay. I have 2 screens going and that always throws me off. So you're thinking about hiring a youth minister for Grace, and it's been so exciting. In this kind of tail end of the pandemic, I've gotten to give quite a few of these. It's exciting to be in a diocese where even in a pandemic, we have congregations that are growing and thriving and healthy. So that's wonderful. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the lay of the land. I'm going to start off like kind of what youth ministry looked like pre-pandemic, how that's changed, and kind of what to think about as we move forward out of the pandemic, and then just some questions to begin thinking, percolating about. So pre-pandemic, traditional youth ministry had been in decline for some time. We had decreased numbers. There was competing with extracurricular activities. I know my kids played club soccer for many years. Like, it's just, kids are busy, and youth ministry fought for their time. And then we discovered that the traditional big youth group lots of kids in a room sort of thing didn't really form young people the way that we hoped it had. You know, we don't see a lot of people in their 20s and 30s that went through those programs still, which makes us think that maybe it wasn't as effective as we hoped it had been. And a lot of times we hope that, you know, once kids might leave the church for a while, but they'll come back when they have kids. And we're finding that that's not really the case, because those kids should be doing that by now, and they're not. So, you know, youth ministry had been in decline, and we also had really high turnover. We did a survey of youth ministry a couple years back, and we discovered that we had really, really high turnover in the diocese of youth minister positions. And we know when we have a rector transition, we know how that affects parishes, that it often, people leave and it creates turmoil, and it affects youth faith too when we have turnover in youth positions. You know, and maybe even more. I've never seen any data on this, but you know, that's a really formative time for youth. And if they had somebody they looked up to, and then that suddenly shifted multiple times in their high school career, like that's really tough. So, and we suspect that most likely our high turnover is when it's low pay and less than full-time hours if someone is going to jump at a full-time position. So now that we're in pre-pandemic, what still did work? So anytime you can integrate youth into the life of the parish, like with acolyting, for example, that's good. Youth are full members, especially confirmed youth, full members of our congregations, and, you know, give them a role. What else works? Creating intergenerational relationships, not necessarily intergenerational formation. That's hard to do really, really well, but church is one of the few places where older generations and younger generations come together these days. That just doesn't happen much, and church is one of those places, and our kids really appreciate that. Also, what works is like family-based ministry. I know you have Aubrey, and she's lovely, but you know, helping parents train their kids and youth, because parents are the primary faith formers of kids, and data shows that the greatest indicator of a child's faith when they're grown is their parents' faith. So faithful parents are going to have faithful kids. So can we raise up the parents too? And what else works in youth ministry? Relationships, lots and lots of time and being where the kids are. So if we have a pandemic, that's just accelerated trends that were already happening. And Kat, you have to show up when I'm on Zoom. Of course you do. You know, most likely church will never look totally normal. Many of these changes, oh, Kitty, come on. Will stick, and youth ministry is no different. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty about what schools that's finally starting to clear up. We're in one full year, this is our third semester of COVID. But school, you know, I have one kid that's online and one kid that's in person. Like, things are different. And our youth ministers we've seen a little bit of turnover in youth ministers, because this certainly isn't the job that they signed up for. I know, Suzanne, nobody trained you how to do church in a pandemic. Not that none of us were trained for this. So this is a hard job, and it's even harder when you feel like you don't know what you're doing. And then, you know, I'm just going to say, you know, people need health insurance in a pandemic too. So that's probably led to a little bit of turnover. So what has worked in the pandemic, you know, keeping families at the center has really done well. People are home more right now with their households. And I want to use the term household purposefully, because often it's not always the parent. It might not always be just the parents that bring kids to church. It could be grandparents or aunts or uncles. So think households, not necessarily just families. And then going where the kids are already going online has worked. We have some, Austin churches that are doing like Minecraft servers for their kids, and David Peters is on TikTok. I mean, so going where the kids already are online has worked well for many of our youth groups. And then thinking creatively, how to do content both offline and online, and how to do things where, it's synchronous, like a Zoom call, or asynchronous, where you have content that you share and then discuss it throughout the week on like a message board or in Facebook groups or that kind of thing. Really, it's like the content is the smaller piece, but the relationship building is the big piece. So wherever you can, have time to discuss a Bible verse all week, even if it's on a text conversation, it's about the relationship and less about the content, even for this theology nerd who wants to talk theology all the time. And one of the benefits is we have all the hours of the week these days, since we're all connected digitally. Content is available. You can go back and watch the live stream of your services all week long, and we haven't been able to do that before. So, and then our youth groups that have been meeting outdoors when possible have had better luck than the ones that have tried to do some stuff indoors. So, even if outdoor movies or playing frisbee golf or what have you, those have been the most successful things. So we're finally kind of on the tail end. I've gotten my first vaccination. I hope many of you are signing up, since all adults can now get them soon. So we're hopefully getting on the other side. So what seems to be working as we're trying to figure this out, listening to what the parents need and want for their families. And generally what parents seem to want is they want, and this is really simple, a warm, happy space that will reinforce the values that they have, and that have a few other kids around for friends for their kids, and offer some activities. That's really all parents want out of a congregation. And that's a pretty easy bar to meet. Specifically in the pandemic, I hear a lot of at requests for how do we deal with exhaustion. Parents, when you have kids online and at home, and parents are really tired. And then there's a impending youth mental health crisis. So I hear specifically in the pandemic, some parents want some help on those issues. So, how do you listen to your parents? You can just survey them. If you're a small congregation, you could maybe just put the parents together in a room. I've heard a lot of suggestions of I haven't been in a group, but I know churches that do parents of little ones, where you bring the parents together and you allow for like a mom's day out kind of a thing. That seems to be useful, but we learn from each other, we build relationships. But you could do something more specific, like a listening circle, or having one-to-one specific conversations with parents to find out what they really want. And sometimes there's a mismatch, and I'm going to name myself as this theology nerd. What churches offer, we want to offer confirmation programs and let's talk about theology because that's what I was trained in. But parents just want a safe space for their kids where their values can be reinforced. And so I'm just going to name that. Sometimes there's a mismatch. We really care about doctrine, and parents just want a safe place for their kids. So what to think about as you start. I know you've already put a thing on the diocesan website requesting things. I don't know, or a job description on the website. But just some things to think about as you go through this journey. Start with your who. Who is Grace? What's the best part of your church? I could probably name a dozen things that's great about Grace already. And from the little time I spent with y'all, what's the best part of what you're currently doing with youth? Suzanne was telling me that you're inviting the youth to come on one Saturday a month to help with the food pantry. That's wonderful. And what do the youth think is the best part of your church? That's always an interesting question to ask. You have kids around, what keeps them there? What brings them back? And then think about your why. What are your goals for the youth of the church? What would success looks like when you have a kid graduate? What do parents think? What do they want for their kids? What things do they want to know? They want their values to be reinforced. We'd love for them to continue on in, a Canterbury program when they go to college. But, what would success look like? Do they need to be confirmed? What do they want for their kids' faith formation? And I kind of alluded to this, what parents want is a friendly and appealing social environment to keep their kids interested. And they're not as interested in, unfortunately for me, what the specific contents of religion. So just keep that in mind as you're planning things. Some other things to think about, what do the youth want? They are, like I said, full members of the church. What do they want for their own program? What do parents want? Are there other stakeholders like the vestry or other volunteers? What do they want for their youth program? And then finally, think about the what. What would be your goals for a youth minister? What would success really look like? How much time do you want them to spend doing that? So then, how will you set up the youth minister for success even before they get there? And are you allotting enough hours and pay for them to get there? So I'm going to stop my slides and I'll let you ask any questions.
Do you think there's a minimum number of people that we should have available for this group to hire full-time youth pastor?
Like a number of youth to, well, the number for a full-time, that's going to be your call on how you think what you can pay. I will say that what I've heard, the number I've heard is that to get kind of critical mass for youth is 10% of your ASA. And I don't know what yours is these days. I haven't looked it up. But if you have 10% of that, kids think that there's enough kids around. So what is your ASA these days, Suzanne? I don't even know.
So pre-pandemic, it was 85.
Okay.
Now it's between 50 and 60 in person and about 20 to 25 online.
Okay. So you're looking, so if you have 8-ish kids, you have enough that they think that there's enough kids around. So
we easily have a dozen.
And you have more.
Yeah. And I think we see most of them, there are a few from families where they have to go to dad one weekend kind of thing. But I think we see most of those kids. We see 10 easily when we have something.
That's a good sized group. We have much larger churches that don't have 10 kids. I'll just name that's really, really good. You're doing something right already.
That's incredible. So I understand everything you went through and the changes, but I'm having a hard time now putting that together of what does a week or what does a month look like for churches who do have a youth minister?
Well, I'll use myself as an example because I was part-time youth minister at St. Timothy's in Lake Jackson before I had this job. And I was 10 hours a week. And what that looked like for me was most weeks it was, 3 hours of EYC and on a Sunday, showing up for church on Sunday mornings, and then prepped for that was most weeks. There were some weeks where we did special events which would take up time, but it was a salary position, so I didn't keep hours, but there were times when it was less because we didn't meet that week for different reasons. And there were times where it was more because we had a mission trip or something like that. So that's probably that's That's a good guesstimate. The bigger churches will have, a junior high and a high school that'll meet separate, so that will double your time there. Extra Bible studies, and then they spend a lot of time, pre-pandemic, going to kids' school, meeting for lunch at school, going to kids' orchestra concerts or soccer games or what have you. So it's a lot of relationship time too in that, and when you start adding hours.
So you were able to do a mission trip with your part-time hours? I mean, a lot of that ended up being volunteer, right?
Yes, it does. Part-time ministry is very rarely part-time, but I knew that going into it, and I was a member. And I should say that I don't know if you have someone in mind out of your parish already, but a lot of times when you're looking for someone part-time, trying to raise someone up out of the parish has been some of our most successful youth ministers. So yeah, if you have someone maybe on the fringes that has a liking for youth, and it doesn't have to be someone young. I think we have this idea that a youth minister must be young to try to connect with them. Kids don't think that. I think that's our fear about us. It's not, kids don't necessarily have that impression. Of course, we're all old. Like, I'm in my 40s and I'm ancient to a teenager. So, they don't care that I'm 40 or 20 or 60. They don't, it's all the same to them. So.
Well, Stephanie, is there a church that perhaps we could model ourselves after in regards to maybe a church that's a little bit further down the road that perhaps we can learn a few things from in regards to youth? Does anything kind of come to your mind?
Let's see here. I'll tell you who the biggest youth group is Church of the Holy Apostle in Katy. They are doing some, their youth group is based on like small groups. And Blaine Pittman is the youth minister there, and he's really rocking and rolling. And if I wanted to get some advice, I would talk to Blaine or to Alex Large at Kotha. They're kind of my rock star church. So Susie Spencer is a wealth of information too. She was down in Friendswood for many years, and she's at Holy Spirit, and she's a wealth of information too. So, and though she's got a little bit of different setups, and she's part-time chaplain at the school. But I will say a lot of congregations have found they do a part-time youth minister and a part-time something else to try to give them more hours. I've seen communications stuck with youth. I've seen like a family, youth and children, make it into more of a family position. I've seen all sorts of things stuck with youth ministry to try to give people a few more hours.
Thank you, Stephanie. Any other questions, Grace?
I don't have any questions. It's just that I can only relate to what, growing up in a different church, we went to church on Sunday nights, and usually before service, Sunday night service, the youth group, starting like at 13 or 14 on up to after you graduated high school, we met before church, and then after church, we usually went over to a sponsor's house for just a social gathering, and that was pretty much on a weekly basis. And I know that when we met prior to church, it wasn't the same as Sunday school, but it was similar in that the theology of the church was discussed, and the differences between other churches, and just bases like that. I mean, and to this day, and I'm a lot older than Stephanie, but some of the people that we were involved together, we're still friends. We're still connected.
Yeah, those relations. Youth ministry is really about building relationships between the youth, so that they have those lifetime friendships between the youth and other adults. I mean, when you're a teenager, the last person you want to hear advice from is your parents. So to have those other adults, like a youth minister in their life, can be really, really, really good. Just to ask about their boyfriends and girlfriends, or whatever their issues are. And some of them are asking big questions about, what does life mean? Especially these poor kids that have had their lives upended with school, moving online and all of that. What does God have in store for me when life is so strange? Some of them are really thoughtful. So to have someone, that can have those conversations with them is really valuable.
Stephanie, I wanted to let you know, and the rest of Grace folks who did not know, but every Wednesday in Lent, we have had a soup supper. And the soup supper has been pretty much handled by our youth. And I've been really impressed with how the youth have come to the administration building from 5 to 7 every Wednesday during Lent, and they have congregated as a group. And I've not seen this since before the pandemic hit. So this was kind of our first kind of coming back together on a more steady basis. And it's been really neat just to see them laughing and smiling and enjoying one and getting to know one another again after being so separate for so long. In church, we're sitting according to families. There's not a whole lot of interaction going, but here they stand around outside, they play, they laugh, they get to know one another. And it's been every week, which I think has been a really good thing for the youth, just to be together.
I think we all have that hunger for connection again. We've had it, but it's been so long, and we're really getting to the point where it's getting safer to do so, and we figured out how to do it safely, and our kids the kids know how to do it safely at school too. Yeah. So they've the kids are better about following the rules than adults are, I've noticed. So it's time, and I'm glad that they've had that opportunity to do that on Wednesdays.
We have one more thing. Ed wants to say something before you leave, Stephanie.
Yeah.
So I just know that my two sons were pretty active in a Episcopal Church youth group, and I mean super active. And then they went off to college. And unfortunately, there was like this complete disconnect. And if there's one thing that looking back, I wish had been a connection, because going to college, it's a tough transition from high school to college. And both of the schools that they went to had Canterbury organizations, whether it was a group that got together to eat dinner on Wednesdays, or they actually had church services on Sundays, but they just didn't feel, connected to do that. And I think some of their heartache that they had when they started school could have been put at ease a little bit more if there was more of, in that last year, maybe like the senior year, there was more of a connection to know that they could feel comfortable, transitioning into college, and at the same time looking for that Canterbury connection.
We've been trying, yes, absolutely, and we've been trying to make that transition smoother to help hand off the kids to Canterbury, and Zoom has allowed us to do some things. I know the missioners have been talking about doing, I don't know if they've actually done it yet, but like a senior introduction Zoom to like meet some of the kids that'll be rising freshmen. So yes, that's definitely, when we did a big survey of the youth ministry in the diocese, that's something we discovered, is that point where they graduate is a point where we lose kids, and whatever we can do to help like shuffle them into Canterbury is better than what we're doing already. So we have some excellent college missioners right now. They're all great at our big schools, and we're trying to get missioners at some of the smaller schools too. So I hear you. That's a hard year. Freshman year at college is a hard year. And these poor college freshmen this year, that some of them didn't even get to move into their dorms. Like my heart breaks. So yeah, it's rough.
Hey, well, thank you, Stephanie, for being with us today.
Absolutely. And you all have my contact information. So if you think of a question, as soon as I hit end on Zoom, feel free to reach out. So
your presentation.
One question before she goes. Does, as the Episcopal Youth Ministry, do they have a formalized outline to follow? I can't think of the word. No?
Not really. No. I mean, generally they'll help with confirmation at some point in the youth years, but beyond that, there's not a structured outline any more than Suzanne gets a structured outline. So you get the lectionary, and that's about it. So no, that would be very helpful. But I mean, there's curriculum out there that you can use, but it's not just like designated from on high. So, and I'd be happy to help, track good curriculum down. People ask for that sort of resources all the time. So I'm always happy to help with that sort of thing. So.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, enjoy the rest of your Vestry meeting.